So unemployment received a lot of assistance under the CARES Act. We've talked about the PUA program, we've talked about PEUC, but another form of, actually, no, hold up, wait a minute. I'm not sure. I just kind of had kind of a revelation. The there was another form of stimulus that unemployment kind of received, which were the extra. It was the extra payment those on unemployment were receiving. Now, I understand it's been a while since people have heard of this, received it. And where I'm having a little bit of confusion is I believe this is what the PEUC is. I don't know. I'm having a moment. I'm still drinking my coffee. But anywho, so this was where this was kind of a hot button issue in the beginning. I don't know if you remember. Those who were receiving unemployment benefits were receiving an extra $600 per week in addition to their state benefits. Then that dried up, I believe it was July 30th. Then you had a situation where the president, COVID in chief, President Trump, signed an executive memo that actually started paying people not $600 a week, but $300 a week in addition to what they were receiving. Now, for some states, they ended up getting 6 weeks of payments. Some states got 5 weeks of payments. And we did have one state that declined payments altogether. Now, the expectation here was that ultimately Congress would get itself together. They would end up paving the way to an agreement where even though the $300 per week would stop, people would get some sort of compensation again, and then it would be backdated to, a previous date. That did not happen. But what I actually want to note about this is that this is one of those things where for most people this has stopped anyways, right? The $600 stopped back in July, but then you also had, for most states, the $300 have already expired if they were already paid. Like they stopped like a month or two ago. Now you have some states that they were really behind the ball, like they really fumbled it for their people, and I hope that their constituents hold their elected officials responsible. But they really fumbled the ball, and they either are still now paying because they didn't start paying until like literally a week or two ago. Some people, I don't know if there's anyone who has not yet started receiving payments who was supposed to, but like 90% of people have already exhausted the benefits. Some people are still getting them, but it's because not because they got more, but simply because their states literally just started paying them. But so that said, another thing that I want to note about this is the fact that, especially as you consider the recent election of President-elect Joe Biden, you're really seeing a lot of people demonize Trump. I have demonized him several times during this podcast episode, right? I've called him COVID in chief. But I want you to consider something, right? Consider, like, for instance, I call President COVID in chief because he is doing everything in his power to promote and spread COVID here in the United States. He's working against scientists. He, is actively out there infecting people. Well, he did when he had COVID. He made sure that his White House harbored COVID, so that way it could be like the number one greatest, best hotspot to get COVID. He wanted to make the White House great again, right? But look, here's the deal. Like, when it comes to demonizing Trump and saying that he did not want to provide economic stimulus, this is where I have to disagree with a lot of people, especially people who happen to be on the left when they say this. And I understand it could either be coming from when people say, well, look, President Trump didn't want to give economic stimulus. I believe that it's one of two things, that one of two reasons why they say this. They either say this because they don't understand that that's factually not true, or they say it because they understand that that it's not true, but because they think that it benefits them to say that, right? We talked about how it benefited Republicans to take on the Tea Partiers and stuff like that. They looked at the short-term game. And I think that the Democrats could be doing themselves kind of a disservice if they continue to spread the narrative that Donald Trump was the problem with stimulus. Keep in mind, Donald Trump, he's on his way out, right? So do you really have anything to gain if you continue to kind of bash him specifically for this? I understand every administration likes to talk about the sins of the previous administration, and they talk about what I inherited. And yeah, that might be factually correct. But look, again, in the words of our president-elect, here's the deal. When it comes to economic stimulus, Donald Trump actually tried. For one, he understood what he had to gain by getting economic stimulus out there, right? And I say all the time, don't just look at what a person says. Don't listen to that. That doesn't matter. Look at what they actually do, right? And to his credit, Donald Trump didn't just say, "Oh, I want stimulus. Give me stimulus." He actually, as they say, he did that, right? Like, dude did that. Like, he got her done, right? He did that, and he did that with withstanding the constraints that he had to contend with. Everyone knows that the power of the purse lies with Congress. So could he sit out there and alone by his lonesome as COVID in chief just sign out new checks? No, he couldn't. And anyone who would tell you that is like telling you a lie. Could he just give $600 or $300 a week by his lonesome to people? No. And you might say, well, Brittany, he got us the if you were on unemployment, he got us the $300 a week. He did that because he reallocated funds that had already been kind of issued, right? It's kind of like when you say you have and they were issued for a specific purpose, right? He couldn't just take money out of the hypothetical bank account of the nation and decide to give it to you and me. He had to take money that was already apportioned to go out to people under specific circumstances. And that's what he did. That's how he was able to do something. And he didn't do that out of the kindness of his heart, right? I'm not arguing that he gave us stimulus because he genuinely cared about the American people. We know, as they say, we know the devil we were dealing with. We knew what we had when we had him, while we still have him, right? But he did what he did because it was politically expedient, and he understood he was up for re-election, and a lot of people were hurting, and people, they are impacted by what they're personally dealing with, right? Just like I said, most people don't care about political issues until they're personally affected. People out there, you hear story after story after story about people saying, "Oh, I didn't take coronavirus seriously," or I didn't wear masks," or "I was a COVID denier," and "I was da 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 da," until they catch it, their family members catch it, and then next thing you know, they're on the news giving us a story about how you need to wise up, listen up. Not saying that that's wrong, because you're allowed to change your mind, and people shouldn't be demonized for that. But in the words of the president, it is what it is, right? So look, so when it comes to that, though, it's wrong to think that President Trump did not want to give stimulus. Again, not because he said, "I want to give you stimulus," but when you actually look at what he did, he did more to give us stimulus than Senate Republicans did. That's actually saying a lot, not about him, but about Senate Republicans. It says a whole heap of a lot. Like, that man did more than COVID in chief did more for America than you? Wow. Wow. Right? So he wanted to get stimulus. So he was not the problem. The Senate Republicans, and not all Senate Republicans were the problem. The problem were the Senate Republicans who were not up for re-election. And that was a sizable lot. Enough that they were able to keep anything in the Senate from going forward. Keep in mind, not only did President Trump give us the lost wages assistance program, which he by his lonesome did with the executive memo, he actually said, and I know we can't, believe a lot of what he says, but when I couple it with what he actually did, I'm more prone to believe that he meant this. And because it served his own personal political motives, I believe that when he said that he wanted something bigger, it's because he understood that the American people were crying out against what the Republicans were trying to give us, which was a targeted, aka smaller package than what people actually needed. One that actually didn't give people a $1,200 check. That's why he said, I wanted something bigger. The bigger the bestest packages this you ever had, right? That's why we heard that. That's why. And look, as here's the thing. Man, oh man. And you can make the argument, well, look, he's the president. He should have been able to wrangle his party. One, it's not his party. We talked about that before. He is part of something completely different that has hijacked the Republican Party, whose responsibility it actually was to wrangle the Republicans together was Mitch McConnell. He failed. That is why he is blah, right? He's just blah. I want to just say something. So I'm just gonna say he's blah, right? And so because he's just blah, he fumbled the ball. It was Mitch McConnell's responsibility. He fumbled it more than the president. Trump should have wrangled him. Trump schmump. He couldn't have done a diggly doggalon thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like Ned Flanders trying to curse, right? Doggone it. Dagnam, I don't know what he said. That was Simpsons so long ago. I haven't seen an episode. But anyways. So look. It was Mitch McConnell. He fumbled, he fadangled it. It didn't happen. It fadoodled under Mitch McConnell. And because of that, again, all of that considered, Trump wasn't the problem. Trump and all of his shenanigans were not the problem. So stop blaming Trump because, again, and I know I was talking about that $600 and stuff, and I went off on another tangent, but Trump actually tried to help people. So when you hear, again, whether it's people from the left or even those trying to take their party back and kind of blame Trump, don't believe the BS because Trump actually tried when you consider he tried to do something in terms of stimulus. Maybe not early on, but eventually when he saw that, Americans are calling out for this can be politically advantageous to me, he tried. He just couldn't do it. And we all know when you understand how politics works, he couldn't have done it by himself. Okay, but look. I want you to consider, when you consider all of that, and I'm going to end my tangent here, that when you consider this narrative with the election of President-elect Joe Biden, when you consider the narrative that we're hearing from not all, but a sizable majority on the left, when you're hearing them talk about how we have taken our politics back to politicians, back from this TV, they're not calling him an impersonator, but what's a reality TV person? I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't know what they call these people, right? From when we've taken our politics back, and they kind of construe this as a victory for politicians, the old guard of politics. I really caution them against that. I really caution them against that because, look, when President Trump, when COVID in chief was elected, he was elected based on an idea. And that shouldn't be surprising because his predecessor was elected on an idea, on several ideas, matter of fact. His predecessor was elected on the idea of, the first of many, right? The first African American, the first yada, yada, yada. He was elected specifically on the idea of change. That was his mantle. right? And so it's kind of funny when you consider Trump, because when you consider President Trump and his his bid for election initially, it actually was a ripoff, a negative ripoff in terms of framing of Obama, right? Obama ran on an idea of hope and change, and we can do, and yes, we can, and si se puede, and da da da. You know what I mean? Like he ran on all of that hopefulness. Not saying that it was bad; it worked. It was what we needed at the time, and you know, I've referenced before how Nancy Pelosi, especially when you look at the negotiations, she tried to put that into like a hope and change perspective, and it's like, look, Nancy, it worked in 2008, but it is not working again, right? But so President Trump, COVID in chief, actually did the same thing when he ran 4 years ago, and it worked for him. So it should not be surprising that he was elected, because his thing wasn't hope and change as Obama framed it, but it was hope and change as he framed it. Mic drop. When you really understand that, when you really get that, as much as COVID in chief bombed on Obama and dogged him and talked about him and questioned him, when you look at what he did did the same thing. He hope and changed it all the way to the White House. But his hope and change was not a politician who was promising hope and change. He was an outsider who was promising hope and change. But here's what I want to caution the Democrats against, because let me get back to this point so I can end this here. The Democrats, they have, since Saturday, I've seen several times, I've seen pundits talk about, we've taken our politics back, and it's especially Morning Joe, right? I love, well, I don't want to say I love, but I've come to actually like it and appreciate it. In the past, I really couldn't tolerate it too much, especially, back in the day before Mika and Joe were married, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm almost watching soft porn, right? So, anyways, so it was like a kind of like a political thing going on, and then like the way she would like look. But anyways. So I've heard this narrative in the last few days where it's like, oh, thank God we're gonna have an adult back in the room. It's a politician, thank God. And I think, yes, a lot of people feel like that. But I want you to understand that as much as people have come to see what Trump really was, where he sold them on hope and change 4 years ago, and he is not what they expected. Like when you go to the store and you buy something, or you see an infomercial, and then you see something and you order it, and you're like, you pick it up right out the box, and you're like, okay, it looked like it was quality, but it feels super cheap, like somebody made it. You know what I mean? Like that, like you instantly have that buyer's remorse. For some people, it was instant with COVID in chief. With others, it took a while. But at the end of the day, most people ended up at that place of buyer's remorse. What I want to caution the Democrats about is this. When we look at what happened with Trump, I said before that this recent election was not so much as a lot of people, myself included, appreciate Joe Biden both as a human and as a politician. This election was not so much a dire just cry out as a nation for Joe Biden. It was more against the re-election of Trump. A lot of people said, look, our buyer's remorse is enough to where even if I don't exactly want Joe Biden, he is better than what we currently have, right? And so what I want to caution the Democrats to kind of be aware about is the fact that just as much as people were able to get that buyer's remorse with Trump, I want to caution you that not only are they able to get it with the old guard that's coming in with President-elect Joe Biden, I want to make you aware that their buyer's remorse is going to be even more quick to occur if you allow it to set in. And that needs to be top of mind, because just how we've, even in President-elect Joe Biden's acceptance speech, how he's talked about, for instance, his plan to, I don't know at this point, it's 10:40 my time, if he's announced his team of scientists and so on and so forth. He plans to hit the ground running. His administration cannot fumble the ball. Because yes, some people, for instance, with COVID in chief, with President Trump, some people immediately kind of got buyer's remorse, but for a lot of people, it kind of happened over time. I am guaranteeing you that the American people are not going to afford Joe Biden and his administration as much time to potentially get buyer's remorse. So, and this goes beyond the times that we're living in, right? We're already dealing with COVID, and you have to have a certain level of excellence from the moment you set foot in the White House. But even beyond that, you have to live up to this higher standard, because what you are likely to do is, if the Biden administration goes in there, they fumble the ball. Obviously, you're going to have some people who have buyer's remorse. You can't get away from that. You're not going to make everybody happy. That's okay. So what? You just have to walk away with not making enough people unhappy, and enough people have buyer's remorse to get you out, right? But so with Joe Biden and President-elect Joe Biden and his administration, if the unfortunate hypothetical occurs where he fumbles the ball and a lot of people end up with buyer's remorse, how people were willing to take a chance on a Donald Trump before, they are not only more quickly going to be willing to do it again, but it is going to not just re-energize, but also revalidate. I don't know if that's a word, but it's going to reinforce the decision that they had before. And what they might end up with is a kind of a complacency where it's like, well, look, you know what? Politics, it just is what it is. The people suck. We're never going to be able to do it. And then so good luck trying to turn people out again in the record numbers that you had this time. Right? This was like literally, this was that one shot that you cannot F it up. I really don't curse, but again, you can't F it up. You cannot. In some people's minds, at some point somewhere, you're going to F it up. It is what it is. But you can't F it up for enough people that they are willing to say, never again. I will always take a chance on an outsider. The old and the new, when you compare the two, a lot of people, they look at this and say, see, they tried the new and it didn't work, and we're back up in there. You're back up in there, but the standard is raised higher. And this is why I say, when I talked earlier about how President-elect Joe Biden is the right man for this time because he's a centrist and he was the only centrist that we had at the time, this is why I tell you, as many people are, for instance, mad at Nancy Pelosi, this is not the time to remove her from her post. Yes, she's extreme in a lot of ways, but when you consider the people around her, when you consider her current caucus, she has the political power that they don't yet have that is necessary at this time. You cannot separate when you have two things going for the Democrats at this time that lie in two people. Nancy Pelosi is a political powerhouse. Joe Biden, he's a powerhouse in his own right, but what he mainly brings to this to this table at this point is his level of political centrism. The centrism, being in the center, coupled with the powerhouse of Nancy Pelosi, is what we need. I like Joe Biden, but by himself, I'm not sure that he could withstand in a lot of ways politically that Nancy Pelosi has proven time and time and time again that she can. She's gone toe-to-toe with some beasts. And I think on the flip side, if you leave Nancy Pelosi alone, and if we would have had that political powerhouse, but the powerhouse coupled with the far left, where the Democratic Party is trying to go, that also would have been a place of danger. Independently, Nancy Pelosi as a political powerhouse cannot stand. Independently, Joe Biden as a political centrist cannot stand. You need both. So if you are a Democrat, I caution you. You've already spoken and you've already said, look, we want Joe Biden. I get that. But this question around Nancy Pelosi and removing her from leadership, I caution you not to do it. I caution you not to do it. Not saying that there are not other political powerhouses on the left, but she is who you need, especially, boy, just she's what you need. She is what you need if you've ever needed anything like anything before. So that said, the old and the new, Democrats, they can't mess this up. So I'm going to leave this here because I've been rambling long enough.